Rules Committee to come to order, and thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. We've just received word that the gentleman, the ranking member, Mr. Smith, has landed at Dulles and is inbound and has asked that we go ahead and proceed. So I just want to make sure we all have, well, there he is. We had known he was inbound. I did not know where that inbound met. Glad you're here, Adam. Today, the Rules Committee will consider H.R. 4904, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2017. This important and yearly authorization is a key mechanism through which Congress fulfills one of its primary responsibilities as mandated by Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, which grants Congress the power to raise and support an army, to provide and maintain a navy, and to make rules for the government and regulation of land and naval forces. That's why we're here today. Chairman Thornberry, the gentleman from Clarendon, Texas, and Ranking Member Smith from the state of Washington have conducted countless hearings, briefings, and roundtable discussions with the Department of Defense civilian and military officials, intelligence analysts, and outside experts to produce the legislation that is before us today. We all think of you as experts, our representatives, as you have these meetings, knowing that you're trying to make sure that we get smarter at the Pentagon and our defense spending. The NDAA begins to correct, I think, deficiencies in our military readiness. It reverses cuts to troop strength. It increases investments in training and maintenance programs, and I think it rebuilds some of our crumbling facilities. Our world has become increasingly complex and in many reasons destabilized. I see firsthand not only the rise of ISIS, but an increase in radicalization across Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. I visited the Middle East a week ago and saw firsthand of not only the destruction of ISIS and this radicalization, but also the threat against these countries, our friends. This legislation ensures the courageous men and women of the United States Armed Forces have not only the resources, but also the right policies in place to achieve what I believe is their important mission, one which not only they're willing to give their life for, but one which they're very proud as they represent the greatest nation in the world, the United States of America. Your commitment, not only to day-to-day job of making sure our military understand that we work with and for them, but that we will support them in their time of need, is also where we are. I want to commend both of you, the chairman and the ranking member, who I have great confidence in, who I've known for many years, and who have provided testimony before this committee for many years with their thoughtful knowledge, articulation of where we need to head. And today is your opportunity, today and tomorrow, to bring forth your best ideas, and that's what we're going to do. So what the committee plans on doing today is hearing your testimony so that we can get started on this long process. We will then take in order many of the amendments that I think that this committee would consider many non-controversial but very important because they come from our members. And allowing this process to get started and then come back tomorrow, so I'm hoping y'all do well enough today to where you'll want to come back tomorrow to give testimony, kick it off, and then we'll have all of our amendments and things that we do. Before we defer to the young chairman from Clarendon, I'm going to ask if the ranking member would wish to have an opening statement. Gentlemen, recognized.
Just very briefly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank both the chairman and the ranking member for being here. I always appreciate the bipartisan way in which they approach some very difficult and challenging issues, and there's a lot in this bill that I think where there's bipartisan support, especially with regard to our veterans and our military retirees. There are things in this bill that I have some big problems with, specifically the continuing authorization of funds for wars that have not received a specific congressional authorization for the deployment of U.S. troops that define their specific mission, whether it be in Afghanistan or the war against the Islamic State in Syria, Iraq, and elsewhere, or the as the chairman of the Rules Committee mentioned, of the various deployments of U.S. military personnel all around the world, from Africa to Asia, for missions that are unclear to the American public and to Congress. During the amendment process, there were some of us who will try to offer amendments to force debates on things like AUMFs to help clarify what we're doing. We think we have a constitutional responsibility to deliberate and vote on these issues that we have up to this point not done. There are other things in here. I mean, I will just, for the record, just say I'm concerned about all the money that's going into the modernization of our nuclear arsenal at a time when I think we should be working to control and reduce nuclear weapons. And you know, this is I think we're on the path of spending more than $1 trillion over the coming years to build a new generation of nuclear warheads, missiles, bombers, and submarines, when I think we should be trying to rein these things in. I'm also concerned about restrictions on the transfer of prisoners held in Guantanamo and blocking the President's ability to close that base. And, of course, the continued controversy over the Overseas Contingency Operations Account. So, so I appreciate the work that both these gentlemen have done, and all the people on the committee. But I hope that we have a amendment process that allows some of these issues where some of us have deep concerns to be heard and debated and voted on. So with that, I thank you for being here, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Mr. McGovern, thank you very much. Gentlemen, I do not need to offer you the advice. You already know this. Every member of this committee, the Rules Committee, could spend hours in our own questioning, in our hours of wanting to know more that you know and wanting to gain your advice. We see you many times around the campus. We watch you on TV. We watch you give speeches. But today is the day that you're going to bring together a bill that I hope and believe both of you will support. I believe now more than ever we can make this bill a bill that will be something, even though some of us may be for some part and against some part, that we can find some consensus about, some rational or common sense to getting there. That's what our job is the next 2 days. Our job over the next 2 days is to ask thoughtful, good, creative questions. You've been up here many times. We're not here to pinpoint you or out-debate you. But you do contain knowledge and background that we do not have. And I will go on record again, as I've said about Mr. Smith for quite some time. I trust his viewpoint and what he's doing. And Mr. Thornberry, I've expressed my personal pleasure in your leadership for quite some time, and know that you have a vast array of reasons why you do what you do, and that's what you're going to have to defend today. So here we go. Without objection, anything you have in writing will be put into the record. We have an awesome stenographer, so I encourage you to leave your 400 pages behind, or whatever you've got, because she's going to need it. The young chairman from Clarendon, Texas, is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I appreciate this opportunity to be back here this year with my partner on this committee, Mr. Smith. I concur completely with everything you said about him, and I really appreciate the way you began your comments. There is perhaps some feeling in the country that since the President's Commander-in-Chief, that our job is to take whatever proposal he sends over and salute and adopt it, but that's not what the Constitution says. He is certainly Commander-in-Chief, but the Constitution puts responsibility on our shoulders to build and provide the armed services of the United States. And for 54 straight years, under majorities of both parties, Congress has passed and presidents have signed into law a defense authorization bill. I think that's evidence of how seriously Congresses through the years have taken this responsibility. This year, this bill comes out of our committee by a vote of 60-2. And that sort of margin would not be possible without the insight, the cooperative spirit, trying to do the right thing for the country that certainly Mr. Smith and I think all members of our committee have provided. So I appreciate the chance to be here. I would respectfully request that this committee issue an appropriate rule for this legislation that allows us to debate many of the issues that y'all have talked about, and of course there are many others, complete with waivers, and very important for us, the ability to consider amendments in block, because that helps tremendously to work our way through a number of these issues. Mr. Chairman, I just want to amplify one other point that both you and Mr. McGovern have made. This bill was built from the ground up. So in addition to the hearings and briefings and the background, the travel and so forth that we've done, when we started on this bill, we asked the 63 members of our committee for their input. What would they like to see in it? Well, we got nearly 2,000 suggestions. And then we asked other members who are not on the committee. So we had 33 members not on the committee come and testify at our member day. We had bipartisan letters and requests and a variety of inputs from members not on the committee. So then we take that, create a mark, and then go through the subcommittee process, the full committee process. 16 hours, 248 amendments were considered in our full committee markup. And then, as y'all well know, by the time it comes to you, I think last I looked, there were 375 amendments that were proposed for your consideration. My point is, this bill that's on your desk is built from the ground up, from the members. And I think that further exemplifies the seriousness with which people on both sides of the aisle take the constitutional responsibility that you referred to. I would summarize this year's bill really in having two major themes or thrusts. One is reform, and one deals with readiness. On reform, I would just say there are 5 major reform packages that are in this bill. Acquisition reform, healthcare reform, commissary reform, organizational reform, including Goldwater-Nichols, a 30-year-old law that in many respects has served us well but is in need of updating, and Uniform Code of Military Justice, UCMJ reform. And just to take an example, some of these issues came to light on sexual assaults at military bases. It pointed out the need for a comprehensive look at the Uniform Code of Military Justice. We required a commission do that. They came back to us, and now we have the most significant reforms of that section of the code that certainly happened in the last 30 years. So there are 5 overall areas of reform in this bill. As you mentioned, we can talk about each of them. Each of them are significant. That's part of the reason the bill is as thick as it is, because there's a lot of modernization in this bill. The other theme, I think, is readiness. The thing that really set my alarm bells off is when I saw the statistics that show the accident rates for the Marines and the Army aircraft really going up the last 2 years. So we start digging into it. Staff visit a variety of bases. I personally have gone to bases, talked with pilots, talked with mechanics, and so forth. I won't spend a long time going through a number of statistics, but the bottom line conclusion, I believe, is that we have a serious readiness problem in our military. And by readiness, it's a term that the military uses, a lot of people don't fully appreciate. It means, are you prepared? Are you supported to go do what the country asks you to do? Have you been trained? Is your equipment in the shape it needs to be in? Do you have the support that's needed? And so I have personally seen aircraft that has had to take parts off of museum aircraft in order to try to keep it flying. I have personally talked with pilots who are getting less than half the minimum number of training hours they are supposed to get to stay proficient in their airplanes because they don't have enough aircraft to keep flying, or at least aircraft in sufficient state of repair. one statistic, last year the backlog of Navy aircraft at Navy depots was 11. Next year it's supposed to be 278. This problem is, and there's a variety of reasons for it. We've been using people and equipment hard the last few years. We have made some temporary repairs in theater in the Middle East, for example. I saw helicopters where we kind of put patchwork on. Until you can't do that anymore, you have to bring them back to the United States, run them through the depot, but then they're so in need of repair, it takes a long time to get them through there. Lots of examples and statistics I can use. We try to turn that around. We do put more money into training and maintenance, but the other thing I've come to realize is if you cut the number of people you have in the military down to a certain level, then you can never be ready. For example, the average experience of aircraft mechanics in the Marines has dropped significantly in the last 2 years. And part of what's happening is we're working the ones we have day and night with no time off. I had one tell me that he is working so hard, stationed here in the United States, he never sees his wife, he never sees his kids. He's leaving for the airlines. He doesn't work as hard and he gets paid better. And so you've seen this trend, and so part of what we do in this bill is to try to stop further cuts in end strength in the Army, in the Marines, in the Air Force, because you can cut people to a point that you just don't have the people to do the job. The other thing I've come to realize is for some of this old equipment, the only way to really fix it is to get a new one, get new. And I'll take one example. I'm sorry that the ranking member, Ms. Slaughter, is not here. She, among others, sent a request to the committee to include the authorization for additional Black Hawk helicopters. And it's a really good example because the Black Hawk helicopter was first came into service in 1979. Some of those helicopters are still being flown. Now, you can't get parts. They are so restricted that the situations in which they can fly is very restricted. And yet the administration asked for none this year in their budget request. A number of members, bipartisan, House and Senate, sent our committee a letter asking for some new Blackhawks to replace the 1979 version. Those were A's. Now we're up to M's. We did that, and we authorized that in our bill. But the key is the only way you're going to have 1979 helicopters rendered safe and repairable is to replace them with 2016 helicopters. And so part of the way we deal with readiness is, yes, we take from the unfunded requirements list, and by the way, all these Blackhawks were on the Army's request list that the administration struck out. All these additional modernization items we took from the services request list and funded what we could. And so the result of this bill is to have at least a turnaround on the readiness problem that I've described. Now, what we also have is a bridge fund that would fund the deployment activities for about half of the next fiscal year. It's not an ideal situation, I fully admit. It is the method, however, we used between the Bush and Obama administrations. In June of 2008, Congress, under Democratic leadership in both the House and the Senate, passed a bridge fund that funded, at that time, Iraq and Afghanistan for several months into the year 2009 to enable the new president to evaluate those activities, look at the funding, make adjustments to either, and make a recommendation to Congress to finish out the fiscal year. We followed that exact same template this year to give the new president, whoever he or she may be, the opportunity to look at the deployments that President Obama has proposed and the funding, make adjustments, and then to send those recommendations to us. So there are many issues in this bill, Mr. Chairman, which I'd be happy to try to discuss as members would like. But I think Overall, this bill tries to do exactly what you said, support the men and women who risk their lives to defend this country. And if I could leave you with one bottom line, for me at least, it is absolutely wrong to ever ask them to go perform a mission for which they are not adequately prepared or adequately supported. A witness testified before us that the price for a lack of readiness is dead service members. And it is wrong to ask them to go do something for which they don't have the equipment or don't have the training to be successful. So that's what we try to do in this bill. There are certainly elements in it that I don't agree with, and I'm sure that will always be the case, but when you take it as a whole, I think it's good for the country and good for our troops, and I appreciate the opportunity to offer these comments.
Mr. Thornberry, thank you very much. Most insightful testimony, and we look forward to the committee getting a chance to ask you more. Mr. Smith, welcome. We're delighted that you're here. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
I appreciate the opportunity, and I want to echo the comments of the chairman. I think this bill does focus on readiness and reform, and also was a bottom-up process that had the participation certainly of the full committee, but of many members of the House as well. And as such, I think we pulled together a pretty good product along those lines. And I think the reforms the Chairman Thornberry mentioned are very important. And I think also the most important thing he said was the discussion about readiness, making sure that our troops are trained and equipped to do whatever mission it is that we ask them to do. Now, there is just one problem with all of this, and that is that the budget, not just for this year, but going forward, is going to have a hard time keeping up with what it is that we want to do on a national security basis. And I think this is the leaping off point to explain this is to get into the discussion that the chairman raised about 2008 and how we only funded half of the supplemental, and then there was supplemental once the new president came in. And that's true. We were at the time, had significant numbers of troops in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we took some of that money that was supposed to be for that to fund the base of the defense budget, counting on the next administration to fund the overseas contingency operations in the coming year. And that's true. But what we have now that we didn't have then is the Budget Control Act. And the number the President sent up for the overall budget, and this is including base budget and overseas budget, was somewhere right around $610 billion. And that is the number that was agreed upon last year in the budget deal to lift the budget caps for 2 years, not just for defense, but also for non-defense discretionary spending as well. And we set those levels. We set that level at 610. And that included what we were going to anticipate for the overseas contingency operation. Those budget caps have not gone away. And when we get to next year, they're still going to be in place. And the Overseas Contingency Operations Fund is supposed to operate within those budget caps. That was not true in 2008. So whoever the next president is and whoever the next Congress is next year is going to have to add money over the budget caps that were passed. And the concern that I have is the willingness of this Congress to lift those budget caps, to get rid of the Budget Control Act. Well, it just hasn't been there. Budget Control Act's been around for almost 5 years now. I didn't support it when it was passed. I think we should get rid of it. I think it restricts discretionary spending in a number of areas in a way that is very unhelpful, and particularly our national security. But we've had 5 years and multiple Congresses to do that, and we haven't. So the Budget Control Act, and it's not really sequestration anymore, it's a cap on what each discretionary area of spending can spend, is a fact of life, and we haven't changed it. So when we get into the middle of next year, it's not just a matter of passing a supplemental. It would be a matter of getting both houses of Congress and the President to agree to lift the budget caps, something that they haven't done. And what if they don't? Then we've got troops in Afghanistan, we've got troops in Iraq and Syria, and I take Mr. McGovern's point and agree with it, that we have not done the AUMF necessary to authorize a lot of that, but it's there and it's happening and it needs to be funded. We can't just all of a sudden say the money's gone, good luck. And with the budget caps in place, that is a huge risk. So what this bill did, basically, our bill, the President sent over his budget with the money for a full year's worth of overseas contingency. We took, I think it's 18, I could be wrong, 18 billion or 21 billion, $18 billion out of that OCO money and put it into the base budget to help fund some of the very real needs that the chairman pointed out. So come the middle of next year, we're going to be $18 billion short on our OCO funding, and the budget caps are still going to be there. Are we going to be able to overcome that? And the last point I'll make before I turn it over to your questions, I'll make two. One, again, a lot of very good stuff in this bill. A lot of excellent reforms that I think are going to get us spending money more wisely. But the real problem that we face in national security policy on our committee, at the White House and elsewhere, is that we have a very complex threat environment, to put it mildly. We have the terrorist organizations like Daesh and Al-Qaeda. We have a belligerent Russia. We have China attempting to expand into territory that is not really theirs in the South China Sea. We still have North Korea and Iran. We have a lot of responsibilities from a national security standpoint. And we have very strict budget caps and a complete unwillingness to raise revenue. And if you look out over 5 or 10 years at the programs that are necessary to make sure that we're not flying 1979 Black Hawk helicopters, to make sure that we don't have mechanics working 20-hour days, to make sure that we're not still flying, the B-52, for instance, as our primary, and all of those deficiencies that are present, we do not have the money over the course of the next 5 or 10 years to fix those problems. And we have shown an unwillingness over the last 5 years to provide that money. So what we're really doing is we're just sort of driving towards the edge of that cliff and hoping that something will fix the problem before we hit it. And maybe it will. We've had two-year agreements in the last 3 years to help raise the caps and spend the money on it. But what I really think we need to do is take a step back and make one of two choices. Either one, we say, yes, the United States of America is going to continue to be the guarantor of national security in many places throughout the globe, and we are going to spend the money necessary on national security to do that, and then raise the necessary taxes or cut the necessary spending or accept the necessary debt to pay for it. Or two, say, well, we don't have the money, so we're going to have to rethink what our national security strategy is. We're going to have to rethink what our priorities are. The size of the military is a good example of this. As Chairman points out, your military isn't ready if it's not at a certain size. But that's only true if you have missions that require it to be at that certain size. The other option would be to say, we are going to downgrade what our responsibilities are, what our missions are, what we have to, quote, be ready for. And I don't know that I know exactly what the right answer is, but I think it's a question that needs to be asked and one that we have continued to sidestep. And one of the answers is trying to save money wherever we can in a responsible way. Base closure, something which we refuse to do. We've had our military shrink in size over the course of the last 5 years dramatically. The Army and the Air Force continually say they are way over capacity in terms of their bases, but we prevent them from closing those bases. We've tried to decommission a variety of different weapon systems, and Congress has steadfastly said, no, you cannot do that. You have to keep spending that money. So we're headed towards a position where we're simply not going to have the money to do what it is that we're saying we want to do. And I hope we can reconcile that. And I remain troubled by the fact that we are going over the budget cap agreements with no apparent willingness to get rid of the budget caps. And what happens 6 months from now when we have these overseas responsibilities and we don't have the money? I think it is a risky proposition and one that we will have to work out before this bill ultimately becomes law. With that, I'll yield to your questions.
Thank you very much. Boy, I don't want to take you on. That's not what I'm trying to do. But for several years, the gentleman from Washington, not you, was up here trying to take away some $400 billion over 10 years that was in the military budget. And I watched this president and the Congress take money away and form the military to their liking. Mr. Dix was up here arguing to do that, and we did do that. The Congress voted to take away money from the military and kept squeezing and squeezing and squeezing them.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Please do.
In 2011, the entire Congress passed the Budget Control Act that set the caps on what could be spent on discretionary spending. It wasn't just the president, and certainly wasn't my colleague, Mr. Dix, who I
It was
know.
in 2010 and 9 when there was a lot of giving back occurred. So all I'm saying is it does always come back to bite us.
Yeah, well,
We took it too far.
the Budget Control Act is what really took it far.
The
That's
Budget
what we
Control
gotta do.
Act has put us where our country is not going to go broke before, the military is not going to go broke before the country will do it all at the same time. We had to get to some agreement. So let's go back to the real policy. Thank you very much. I've just come back from the Persian Gulf, was out on the USS Truman, which is part of the carrier strike force that is out in the Gulf, and the morale is good. The mission is seemingly clear, and our adversaries are flying ISR and a lot of other things directly at our carrier group, and we're hearing from them. I think they're doing a great job. What you're doing in this bill is to make sure the readiness is there, but you're also making sure that we get new equipment. I saw old equipment all over the Truman, and that's our frontline carrier group. How do we effectively get that money there? And what you're authorizing, you've made the point, well, we don't have the money to get it all done. Do you prioritize in this bill or provide verbiage to the Pentagon for that need?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. And we include or take into consideration the requests, of course, of the administration. But as I mentioned, we also take into consideration the items that have been requested by each of the services, which did not make the final cut through OMB when the request comes over to us. And so that's where we get virtually all of the difference between us and the president. If I may make one other point, Mr. Chairman, and the staff can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that the Truman has been extended in its deployment.
1 month.
We have considerable periods of time when we are not able to have a carrier in the Persian Gulf these days. And we don't fix that in this bill. Obviously, carriers take a long time to construct, but I do think it gets to the point that Adam was raising. We have just a certain amount of capability and a world that is growing more dangerous all around, not just in one part of the world, but all around the world. And so that is a key challenge for us going forward. And I think what we have outlined here gives the new administration the chance to ask the hard questions that Adam was just asking. Should we have a diminished presence in the world? Maybe we don't need carriers in the Persian Gulf or in Asia off China's coast as they are building new islands out of the ocean. Or if we do need it, then we got to figure out a way to pay for it and to provide it. So I think this is an opportunity to come to grips with those difficult questions.
Listen to Mr. Smith as he amplified that. It was very, very, very apparent to me. You talked about health care. Obviously, the gentleman, Mr. Culverson, when he previously had the appropriations job that he did, would come up here. We would regularly talk about this. I talk about it every single time about the money, over $1 billion that was provided for the specific purpose of making sure that we merged up, fixed between the DOD and Veterans Administration. Can you, either one of you, please provide me your idea of where we presently are in that process and why you said it was one of the major pieces that needed to be addressed?
Well, sorry. I was just looking for my notes, Mr. Chairman, on this issue about compatibility of medical records
Yes, sir.
between the VA and the Department of Defense. There have contracts have been let to have to commercial firms to standardize this, and so we are at least making progress down the road. We're not there yet. And I am just as frustrated with anybody else about how long it has taken when we make the private sector have compatible medical records. One government agency is unable to have compatible records with another is just something that none of us can tolerate. But the reforms that are in this bill are much broader than that. Our Personnel Subcommittee Chairman is General in the Reserves, Dr. Joe Heck, who has significant reforms of the TRICARE program, but also of military health care in general. One of the big concerns is we are incredibly advanced on treating battlefield injuries versus what we were 15 years ago when 9/11 happened. But you can't keep that expertise automatically. And so he has a number of reforms here to have closer relationships with civilian trauma centers with the military to help keep those skills more current for the military folks. A number of other things that are in there. So I guess my point is there is a broader look at military health care, not only from the beneficiary side, but the how do we keep the essential skills current side that is really important. But we're not going to take our eye off the data issue either.
Does that involve what I might call a public-private partnership where a patient would be given the ability to go to a major trauma center or complementary activities, or do we still put that off into silos where you can't do that, or it's inconvenient, or it's untimely?
Well, there is some of that where if a particular specialty is not available, I think some effort to make it available within the community. But what I was really referring to are the skills of the doctors, so that we have military doctors much more engaged at Parkland Hospital or wherever may treat a lot of trauma injuries so that they can keep their skills current. So there's a lot that Dr. Heck is trying to do here to have better partnerships between the military and civilian worlds for mutual benefit.
Well, I know I've had discussions with a Stanford doctor, Dr. Vanila Singh from Stanford University, who is she's an anesthesiologist, a pain specialist, and she's talked about how she sees men and women as they're departing the military come to the civilian world with a lot of injuries. I'm sure those are within the military too. And I know anesthesiologists are among our most valuable assets, as well as radiologists within the medical community to address lots of these issues. And we'll continue to seek feedback from them, and I know you do too, and thank you very much. Gentleman, Mr. Byrne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't take very long because I'm going to have this on the floor, and we got to spend almost a full 24-hour period working on this in committee. I want to thank the chairman and the ranking member for the job they do in leading the committee. This is a bipartisan committee, and I think both the chairman and the ranking member take the bipartisanship very seriously and work very hard at maintaining that. And not just as a member of Congress, but as a citizen of America, I really appreciate that. I think it's important. I do want to touch on the AUMF issue because this came up last year. It came up when I was managing the rule, and it came up in committee. And I came back and talked to my staff, and I said, okay, what do we have to do to get jurisdiction in the Armed Services Committee over an AUMF? Because I thought we could just change a House rule to do it. We can't. The War Powers Act of 1973 specifically and exclusively vests jurisdiction over authorization to use of military force in the Foreign Affairs Committee. That was not new. Apparently, the Gulf of Tonkin resolution came through the Foreign Affairs Committee, and apparently both the Declaration of War in World War I and the World War II came through the Foreign Affairs Committee. So if we tried to stick this AUMF issue into this bill, we would not only be violating a statute, a long-standing statute, but we would be violating 100 years of precedent. Now, I happen to be one of the people that signed letters and made public statements that I think that we do not have an adequate authorization for what's going on in Syria. I've said it multiple times. I've signed letters. I've made requests. And I did what I thought I could do to try to fix the committee's jurisdiction. But based upon what I've been told, and we've done pretty thorough research, we can't fix that. It would take literally an act of Congress, and I do believe our friends in the Foreign Affairs Committee would have a few things to say about that. So as much as I would like to resolve that issue, I don't think this particular bill is the appropriate vehicle to do so. I know we're going to have discussion about that, but those were some things I didn't know, and I just wanted to make sure we got it out on the table so that we all knew it before we get into that discussion. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Thank you very much. Gentleman of Massachusetts recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
First,
sir.
I'd like to ask unanimous consent to insert in the record the statement of administration policy on the bill.
Without objection.
And just for the record, if the President were presented with H.R. 4909, his senior advisors would recommend that he veto the bill, but just wanted to have that for the record. I would say to the gentleman, Mr. Byrne, I would have told you that last year when we talked about this, that the Foreign Affairs Committee is the committee that ultimately should be the one to draft an AUMF. But the amendments that we offered last year and the amendments that we offer this year continue to be germane, because it doesn't require that the Armed Services Committee be the one to write the AUMF. It requires that we actually debate and vote on an AUMF. And if not, then we cannot continue the funding for these wars. It is that simple. And I have to tell you, in all honesty, we've been talking about this issue for years. And every time it gets brought up, there's another excuse on why we can't do something. We have appealed to various speakers of the House. We have appealed to the chairman of various committees. We have tried all kinds of parliamentary maneuvers to try to get this thing up, and never can quite get to it. I understand it would be very difficult, given the polarization of this place, to actually come up with an AUMF that will pass. But that is not an excuse for us not to debate and to vote on it. The fact of the matter is, it is our constitutional responsibility. We talk about making sure that our troops have all the support that they need, and that readiness is a priority, which I absolutely agree. When we send our forces anywhere, they ought to have the equipment to do whatever we're asking them to do. But we don't even have the courage or the guts in this place to actually debate what the mission should be and whether we support the mission. And I think that's cowardly. I really do. And so we're going to try to make that a point. I know that everybody's got their own opinions on it, but we're going to try to make that. And the amendments that we have offered, by the way, are germane. We've checked with the parliamentarian on that. Just one thing, if I can, which is in the scheme of all the things that are in this bill, this may seem like a minor issue, but both the chairman and the ranking member were very helpful last year about this. And this is the issue of atomic veterans and getting them the recognition that many of us think that they ought to have. We had an amendment that, a bipartisan amendment last year that was stripped from the NDA last year in conference at the insistence of the Senate, that basically would have created a medal to honor atomic veterans, while their surviving family members would get it to honor their service and their sacrifice to our nation. Between 1945 and 1962, 225,000 members of our armed forces participated in hundreds of nuclear weapons tests, and U.S. code designates them as atomic veterans. They were sworn to secrecy. They were unable to even talk to their doctors about their past exposure to radiation. Many of them dealt with diagnoses of cancer, but couldn't even talk about, their past. Both Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush recognized these veterans in terms of their service publicly, and acted to provide specialized care and compensation for their harrowing duty. Tragically, more than 75% of them have already passed away, never receiving that recognition. But many of us believe they ought to be recognized for their service with a medal, with some sort of recognition that way. And the DoD has argued that it would be unfair to award these veterans any kind of recognition like that, because other service members were part of serving our country, dealing with hazardous situations. I think we ought to honor everybody who served our country and who has sacrificed in the way these veterans did. I've been told that we can't identify who they are, yet we can identify who they are for medical purposes. Can understand why we couldn't, why that's an excuse. But I did have a meeting with the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Military Personnel Policy after it was stripped, because I wanted to figure out what was DOD thinking. And the argument they kept on coming back to is, well, we never had this medal before they engaged in this service, so therefore we can't retroactively honor them. Of all the excuses, that to me seems to be the lamest. And I have to be honest, I've sat through many meetings where people have disagreed with me, but that meeting with this official was one of the most frustrating meetings I've ever experienced because of the dismissiveness toward the service of these veterans and the insensitivity. And so we're going to we have an amendment again. We're going to try to pursue it, but you know, as I said, 75% of these atomic veterans have already passed away. I don't know if we're going to wait for everybody to pass away before anybody does this, but I appreciate both gentlemen and their help last time. We're going to try it again, and hopefully we can convince some of our colleagues in the Senate to do the right thing and stand up to, I think, what is the insensitivity of some in the Department of Defense who have just constantly put up roadblocks to this. So anyway, I don't have any questions other than to say thank you again for what you're doing, and I hope that we can, a lot of these issues, that we'll be able to debate on the House floor and have vigorous debate and have votes up or down on it.
Gentleman yields back his time. Thank you very much. Gentleman from Louisville, Texas, Dr. Michael Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I should remember last year better, but I don't. Did the president issue a similar statement of administration policy last year?
And every year.
And the end result was that the NDAA was signed into law. Is that correct?
Finally.
There were a couple changes along the way, I guess, but yes.
Well, while it's tempting to go through the discussion for last year, the president did veto the bill on first presentation after the budget agreement was reached and the numbers were adjusted. He signed the same bill after that. But a lot of the, I haven't seen this, but a lot of the policy objections
Well, if I may,
have been consistent over the years.
Yeah, it wasn't the same bill. It had the different money in it to reflect what the budget will. But it is true that there are consistently objections from the administration that we work our way through.
Very well. This is a difficult question to ask, but I feel like I must because it's become part of the sort of the national discussion in a presidential year. I heard both of you discuss that either the United States taxpayer, what I heard testified to earlier, but is there ever a place that the United States could look to its friends, its allies, to whom it is providing protection for some help in providing these protections around the world? Absent the United States of America, other parts of the world become inherently more dangerous. So our presence is indeed beneficial, and if the American taxpayer simply cannot keep up with the demand, is there any opportunity to look to other friends and allies for help in that regard?
If I may, it's okay, and I could go down a deep theoretical rabbit hole here, but I think you have hit upon what is one of the most important national security question that we have to answer in the next decade. The answer to your question is that has to happen. When I said that the U.S. has been the guarantor of national security throughout much of the globe, I did not mean to imply that that has to continue. In fact, from a budgetary standpoint, it cannot continue the way it used to. So what's the solution? Just give up on those parts of the world? No, the solution is exactly what you just said. So I know you and I have argued before this time, but I'm 100% in agreement with you on this. We have got to find partners to work with, and in some places we have. I cite the example of the Horn of Africa, where we've been able to contain reasonably well an extremist threat in Somalia and then right across the Red Sea in Yemen. But we've had a ton of cooperation from Ethiopia, from Kenya, from Uganda, from Saudi Arabia. If we are going to be able to keep the peace, we're going to have to build those relationships and find those partners, because the sheer cost as the threat environment expands of the U.S. always not only taking the lead but doing 95% of it, we can't. And by the way, I don't think that's effective policy either. I think you have to get buy-off from the rest of the world. So yes, I think we absolutely have to find partners instead of always putting the burden on the back of the American taxpayer.
And if I could just, I guess, make 3 quick points. One is, there are a number of partners that do a lot, which is generally not recognized. So, for example, much of the cost of having our folks stationed in Japan and South Korea is borne by the countries of Japan and South Korea. So we shouldn't say that nobody's doing anything, because that's not true. Now, European NATO countries definitely need to do more. Many of them, most of them, have not met the minimum 2% threshold of their GDP for defense purposes that NATO agreed upon as a goal. So there's no doubt lots of people need to do more. The second point I'd make is that there are also instances where other countries want to do more, but U.S. leadership is key for them doing more. And when they are uncertain about us and our commitment to the mission and whether we're going to be there to assist them, they're not likely to step up. And we've seen some of that, I think, in the Middle East with doubts about our policy, about red lines and so forth that were not pursued. Third point I would make, and this my opinion is, we don't have to do everything. We should not try to do everything. But there is also no substitute for U.S. leadership. And we need to encourage others to do more. I agree with Adam. Working with others, through others, is often more effective, even if they can't do it as well as we can do it. But when the U.S. steps back and is not involved, then nobody else is going to take our place, and we have to be ready for a world that is tremendously more dangerous in that event.
And along that same line, one of the things that has concerned me over the several years that I've had the privilege to sit here on the Rules Committee and go through the rule for the reauthorization of the National Defense Authorization Act is well, I want to be able to go home and give my constituents the reassurance that every dollar that is spent on defense is well spent. And to that end, it was frustrating to me that an audit of the Pentagon that was agreed upon in the early 1990s had never been performed. Now, I'm grateful that the amendment made it into the bill last year, and that was the bill that was signed after the veto or whatever the sequence. And I've just had the report made available to me, so I'm going through that. But I'm grateful for that kind of activity, because I think that is the demonstrable effort we need to be able to show our constituents back home that, yeah, we want to spend the money we need to spend on defense, but we don't want to be spending foolishly on our defense dollars. So I'll thank both of you for bringing a rather complete product to the Rules Committee, and look forward to all of the amendment debate over the next several days. So thank you both, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from Florida, Judge Hastings.
Thank you very much,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, and Chairman and Ranking Member, let me thank both of you. You deserve all of the compliments that all of our colleagues here in Congress offer to you and the other members of your committee. It's an extremely complex job that you do, and it's deeply appreciated by all of us. I've had the good fortune of working with both of you, and I know your work ethic, and can assure those who do not that there are no two finer persons than Chairman Thornberry and Ranking Member Smith on this subject. I'm a co-sponsor of several bills or amendments to the bill, and I look forward to commenting on them as they come up. But I wanted to take a moment and ask you all to reflect on the special immigrant visa issue. It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this legislation makes significant changes to the structure of the immigrant visa program. And it could, I don't know that it will, perhaps you can tell me, result in our denying some of our Afghan allies safe haven in the United States. I think both of you know, and some of the members of the committee have heard me discuss active work for a protracted period of time dealing with refugees, and specifically first Iraqi refugees, and then Syrian refugees before the conflict had reached the state that it is in now. And I just somehow or another can't call it anything but short-sighted and wrong when we have people that help us, help our military, and then we are unable to help them. And I recognize, as much as anyone, the inherent danger of bringing people to us. But I'm sure each of you, and maybe other members, as have I, have had people reach out to us who had, let's use Iraq as a for example, family members who did, in fact, help the military with interpretation and the whole array of undertakings. And then when our effort lifted for the moment, and some of them sought to come here, many of them are still in a pipeline. Many of them are dead, quite frankly, because they didn't get an opportunity to get out. So what's your thinking? Does this reflect what I'm saying with reference, and I'll stick specifically to Afghan refugees?
Mr. Hastings, I appreciate the chance to discuss this because I know how seriously you take this issue. Part of, so our bill reauthorizes the program, but it changes the criteria to narrow it down. I will not tell you that we've gotten the wording perfectly, and I would be certainly interested in working with you to improve it moving forward. Part of the reason that I have believed we ought to narrow down the scope is I was in Afghanistan last year and had conversations at the embassy on this very topic. I think everybody agrees anyone who assists us, whose life may be in danger, ought to be protected. The frustration that embassy employees expressed to me was that there was a treadmill developing where Afghans would go to work at the embassy in Kabul for 1 year for the sole purpose of coming to the United States.
Right.
And part of their frustration was just when they learn their job, they're leaving. It's nothing, and they're not very good employees when they're here because they don't intend to stay here. They intend to leave in a year.
Right.
And so it has become just this treadmill for the purpose of getting out of Afghanistan. Some of the Afghan officials had expressed to our embassy folks that we're losing too many people this way. Can't y'all do something about it? Now, one suggestion is make them work for 2 years, or lengthen the amount of time they've got to work for. So that's what I was trying to deal with, the frustration that our own people in the embassy had expressed. But I fully acknowledge that this may not be the right language, and secondly, anyone who is at risk for cooperating, helping the United States, especially our military folks, I want to protect.
Yeah. And there are the interpreters, for example, who are embedded with our forces, are in a special category, at least the way I see things. I won't belabor this, but I do want to make a comment for not you, Mr. Thornberry, and Mr. Smith's edification, but for my colleagues on the committee. The complexities that you all confront don't allow for simplistic conclusions. And this is a time in our world when it would be important for us at every level to try to avoid bumper sticker talk and get into the business of the specifics of what is required, particularly for military readiness. I don't have any hesitancy, and perhaps it's because of age, I don't have any hesitancy in saying that I'm willing to pay more taxes in order that we do the things that are vitally necessary. I also don't have any hesitancy in joining my colleague, Mr. McGovern, about our requirement, I believe, to do an authorization of military force. I just don't think it's right. I've had a well-rounded life, and I get an opportunity to see a lot of America and have been fortunate enough to see a lot of the world. And with both of you, some of the soft underbelly of the world as well. I hearken back to my childhood, and I'll be 80 my next birthday. In my childhood, I was in Jersey City, New Jersey. In the third grade, the second grade was spent in Newark, New Jersey. My father worked in a factory in Hackensack, and my mother worked in a factory in Brooklyn. Everybody in both of those cities knew that we were at war. All the children knew, all the families knew, and I'm not talking about race here. I lived in an extremely mixed neighborhood of Polish, Italian, Jewish, and black people on one street on Manning Avenue in Jersey City, New Jersey, probably one of the best experiences of my life. But at the very same time, we were willing to make the sacrifices. Everybody talked about sacrifice, and everybody, we had rationing, and we had school training and blackouts for training, and everybody was involved. That's no longer the case. We have a special category of people that have been pushed to the maximum at every level that you all are addressing here in this bill. And at the very same time, most of us are going about our business, and our nation is going about its business as if nothing else is happening. And so we are the ones that are sent here to provide the leadership, and it would be my opinion that we ought to do whatever is necessary to untangle the fiscal responsibilities that have been mired in short-sighted measures and get on with the business of assuredly making our military be comfortable. I wanted to talk to you about TRICARE and the logistics changing. All of us have TRICARE veterans in our area. And as I say, I won't belabor it, but it's very troubling to me that, number one, we don't want to go online taking a vote to authorize the use of force, and at the very same time are unwilling to tell the American public, our constituents, that if we want to be able to have a ready military, and my colleague from Texas, Mr. Burgess, I don't agree that the American taxpayer should have to protect all of the world. But it should not be misunderstood that many of the adventures and misadventures that we've been involved in have been economic as much as they have been moral. And that needs to be clearly understood. We've done a lot of things, and we have a lot of allies. We could go around the world and point to them that have done a lot of things with us to assure that our national interest is protected. And there's been a massive separation of what corporations, international corporations, do and how it is, both at the State Department and our defense, that many are reliant to make money and while we make war. So let's don't misunderstand that directive. And if we want to be about our business in fairness to our constituents, then man up and woman up and get on with the business of telling the people what we are really confronted with. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back his time. Thank you very much. The gentleman from Ohio, the gentleman who is a colonel in the United States Army Reserves, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank both the chairman and the ranking member for all their hard work. I know you guys spent basically a lovely evening together, considering lots and lots of amendments on important policy matters. And
It was a morning and afternoon and
morning-
evening and a morning.
Oh, I'm sorry. A morning and afternoon, evening and a morning. And I just want to thank you for the hard work. And I know you don't always agree on everything, but I know both of you come to this committee and come to this town and this Capitol building with the best intentions to do what's right, to defend our national interest and our people. And I just want to thank you for all of that and tell you that we appreciate your hard work and appreciate you being here with us today. Could either of you highlight for me anything that might be in the NDAA with regard to the suicide epidemic that is infecting and affecting our troops and their families? I know that the military is taking it seriously, but we lose 22 veterans and active military folks a day to suicide. And is there anything in here that is new on that, in that regard? And I know that we did a lot of stuff last year on it, so, but I didn't know if there's anything in here new, because I should have looked at it and I didn't know.
Ms. Stivers, I'm not sure there is something new, like a brand-new program, but I do think we made a lot of progress last year.
Did.
We are certainly continuing, if not amplifying, our oversight of some of, especially these, for example, warrior transition units, and some, because as was mentioned earlier, it's this transition that often, where often there are some of the issues. But there are.
And to be fair, my number includes veterans, not just active duty folks, and include veterans of multiple eras. In fact, one of the biggest populations that we're still seeing a lot of suicide among is Vietnam veterans.
Yeah, and I would say this, there is, I can't tell you off the top of my head the dollar amount, but there is a significant amount of research that is still going on to understand post-traumatic stress and other issues, especially that have affected this generation, but they give us insights into what's happened to the Vietnam and prior generation too. So I think that is absolutely appropriate places for the Department of Defense to conduct research. There may be some other areas in which the Department of Defense conducts research that don't have that nexus to to combat. So it is.
And I appreciate your commitment to it. I know we did a lot last year. There were a bunch of new things last year. I just didn't see anything in here and didn't know if I missed something. But I appreciate both of your attention on it, and I know that you do care about it, and you've spent a lot of time and attention on it. And I'm not trying to say that we have to have a new program, because frankly, we just need to figure out how we can help all these folks, many of whom aren't in boots anymore. So,
Well, and if I'd say, the other thing is, we got to pass something and then stay on top of it to make sure it's working like we intended.
Agreed.
Rather than passing something new all the time.
That's right.
And so that's really what I think we're trying to focus on.
thank you. Do you have anything to add to that, or?
No, I agree
Okay.
with both of you. I think it's a problem that we really need to focus on, and we have taken steps in the
You
past,
have.
and now we got to implement them.
We all have, and I appreciate everything you've done. And this is not to make the many accomplishments in last year's NDAA sound trivial or anything. I just wondered if there was anything that I missed in there. That's why I asked. Thank you for all your work on everything. Thanks for everything you're doing to set our defense policy in the right direction. And I know there's a lot of great stuff in this bill, and I appreciate all of your work on it. I yield back the balance, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you both for your hard work. I have a couple amendments, and I know we are negotiating with the committee on some of those and hope to have one or two in block. Appreciate your willingness to work with members across the aisle on a number of ideas that have been submitted. Three things I wanted to do. So I think, the main thing I hear about from my constituents on defense is they see this really big ticket item, and we all want to, of course, protect our country. But what we wonder is, are other countries paying their fair share. And so in specific, obviously, one of the increase risk scenarios you're looking at are the Pacific and the actions of China in the oceans there. Are there efforts underway to try to make sure that Japan and our allies step up and, in fact, contribute more financially to the costs of securing our mutual interests in that theater so the full burden doesn't fall on American taxpayers? I'll ask the chair and the ranking member both.
As the chairman mentioned earlier, both Japan and South Korea pay a substantial portion of the cost of our presence over there to begin with. And yes, I think diplomatically it's in that case, it's gosh, at least a half dozen, if not more countries that are involved. And we are trying to reach out to work with them in a coordinated fashion. So I think that effort is underway.
And if I could just add, I think it's important for all of us to recognize the changes in Japan in the last year or two. The Prime Minister has taken bold steps for them to take a more active role in providing for their defense, given their heritage and all that entails. So not only does Japan help offset a tremendous amount of the cost for our people being there, they are stepping up in ways that are culturally very bold for them to do more, but partly because of the provocations coming from China. So there's some change going on there.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to be important to demonstrate to certainly, my constituents, because they look at the top line figures, they see the percentage of our GDP we spend on defense, they see the percentage Japan spends on defense, and it looks like, we're subsidizing a wealthy nation, and to a certain extent we are, and hopefully it's less over time. So we'll continue to work on that. The second question I have is sort of a thematic question. I'll give you an example, and I'll ask kind of if there's a way to, or if you think the bill does, or if there's a better way to kind of align incentives in the military around cost effectiveness. Like take a wonderful and cost effective new technology like drones. I mean, I'm amazed, they tell me they only cost a couple $1 million. I see them, they're amazing. I'm obviously a layperson, you guys have deep sector knowledge, but compared to a man fighter, the cost could be, 1/200th or 1/100th. The military, of course, rightfully so, gets very excited about the new capabilities that drones bring. They bring extensive new capabilities. What I'm wondering if we can do a better job at is creating the incentives where they're equally excited about ways that they can reduce costs of existing functions that are covered by, let's say, manned aircraft in this sense. So, wow, drones can do this and that manned aircraft can't do, wonderful. Let's say they can do these other things in a more cost-effective manner. Do they have that kind of incentive structure in the military where if we find a more cost-effective way of reaching X capability, there's actually a driving force to make it happen?
I think the DoD has that incentive, yes, and the incentive is a lot of stuff we've talked about. They don't have enough money to do what they want to do. So if they can find a place to save some money and do it in a more cost-effective way, they have that incentive. The problem is the bureaucracy and a whole lot of other folks who don't have that incentive, the people who make the alternative. And manufacture it and where those jobs are. And so to get any of those changes made, and we went through this to some degree with the, gosh, I'm forgetting the precise drone that was involved, but we were trying to figure out the U-2 versus the Global Hawk. And depending on, I think we can do it more cost. Their first proposal was to get rid of the Global Hawk, rely on the U-2. Everyone screamed bloody murder about that. So their second proposal was, okay, we'll get rid of the U-2. Well, other people screamed bloody murder about that, so they kept them both. So I think the problem is, and it's not just the military-industrial complex, it's all of us as members. If this is something that happens to be built or stationed in our district, and the military comes along and says, we could do it cheaper with this, then there's pushback that comes from members, that comes from industry. That's what makes it difficult. And, of course, there are layers within layers of bureaucracy, depending on some of which, the chairman has gotten at with the acquisition reform. I mean, you go through program managers, 6 months, who's in charge? Who's in charge of making the decision that you just outlined? And the answer to that question is probably about 500 different people, and how do you coordinate that? Now, I will say that I think Secretary Carter, Acquisition Chief Kendall, they have really focused on how to get around some of these things and to make those decisions. So I think the incentive is there, but the impediments, many of which we are trying to reduce, I wouldn't be so bold as to say remove, with acquisition reform, the impediments to getting to that more cost-effective solution really lie more in the bureaucracy than the politics. than in having the base incentive. So that's what we're trying to work on.
That's exactly right. To have the incentives in the acquisition system be toward a more cost-efficient solution rather than, and just a simple example, we've all dealt with it. If you're in charge of a government office and you spend all your money one year, then you get money the next year. If you don't spend all your money, you don't get as much money the next year. So what's the incentive to do? It's to spend all your money. And just take that, times however many for the Pentagon. And so part of it is also the way we look at these accounts, and what we encourage and what we punish or reward people for doing. Although I think Adam's right, it's the incentives within the structure itself. That's what we're trying to get at with acquisition reform. But it's big cultural type change, so I don't want to over-advertise.
I hope you're also looking at, and this is something that whenever we have the budget committee up here, I always bring up with them, and we don't have, as you know, a federal capital budget, but I hope you're looking at kind of capital in the sense of, is this a 5-year investment or a 20-year investment? How long does the military expect they're going to be utilizing this? Let's make one that lasts longer rather than shorter, those kinds of things, even outside the 10-year budget window.
Yeah, and if I could just say, we've had testimony that says when we look at buying a new weapon system, we need to include the total cost of what it's going to take to keep it in service over its expected life, the whole logistical tail. We, the Congress, have not done very well in looking at the total life cycle costs over time, and that is one of the things we're trying to do.
Finally, for the ranking member, I think the committee mark in terms of including women in the draft is the right direction. I absolutely support it. It's inevitable. But I want to ask you about another direction. I have a bipartisan bill with Mike Kaufman to actually eliminate the draft. There hasn't been a draft in my lifetime. We have an all-volunteer military for all intents and purposes. We expect that that'll meet our needs for the foreseeable future. And if in the future a draft needed to be set up, I think we could do it more efficiently. Is that an alternative direction that you see as viable to, if we're not, either include women in the draft, or alternatively, do you think that our nation can be safe and we can reach our force goals without a draft?
Well, just to understand, we don't have a draft.
Without registration.
What we have is selective service.
Right.
And it seems to me, all selective service means is you sign up so that if a draft becomes necessary, we know who you are and we know where you are. I remember doing that when I was 18, and if women are going to be able to serve in every role in the military, it makes sense that they be part of it too. I don't think that we're going to need a draft. I think that we're going to stick with an all-volunteer military for a very long time, but it strikes me that it makes sense to have people who would be eligible for military service sign up through the selective service process that we have. And then we in Congress will decide whether or not there's a draft, but at least if there is, we'll then be prepared to implement it. So
Yeah, and I think, obviously the question is, it costs, nothing comes free, and I think the costs were something like $250 million for a selective service system. I understand there were also implications in reduced student aid if, so actually adding women saves money somehow. I never can figure out government accounting, but, so I think with where we are today, certainly adding women makes sense, but I would urge the committee to look at Mike Kaufman's proposal to see whether, if we can save the money and not have selective service now, would it in fact cost more if we ever needed to reinstitute it in the future? And with today's technology, would it be quick and easy to reinstitute? I think it probably would.
We can take a look at it.
Yeah, and obviously, as I said, there has not been a draft in my lifetime, and obviously, we never know what the future brings, but obviously, we pride ourselves on an all-volunteer military. Happy to yield to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Paulus. I just want to say I agree with you that we need to look at this. As I understand it, the last time the need for the draft was reviewed was 1994. A lot's changed since then. I really think we ought to ask those questions first. Do we need a draft? What would it mean if we didn't have one? What would it cost if we had to bring a bunch of people in? Ask those questions first before we ever get to the who would be included in a registration of slate. To me, that's a more logical. And you rightly point out some of the very interesting, surprising complications from a budgeting standpoint that this entails. None of that was discussed, by the way, in the committee. When the committee considered this amendment, I thought it was going to be withdrawn, and so I think there is certainly many more questions to find the answers to here.
I thank the gentleman, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. We next ask the gentleman, Vice Chairman of the committee, if she chooses to take time. Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say thank you to my colleagues. I'm sorry I had to go out, but I've heard what the chairman's saying, particularly on acquisitions. He knows, he and I have talked about that at some length. And I'm very pleased to see the direction the committee's going in. And I want to thank all of our colleagues on the armed services for the work they do. This is the #1 role of the federal government. I say that over and over when I talk to people, the defense of this nation. And I appreciate the care with which you are going about bringing this legislation to us. I just want to say thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Bielsbacher. Time, the gentleman from Oklahoma, Chairman Cole.
Thank you. I just want to echo my good friend from North Carolina's remarks. I had the privilege of sitting on that committee for a number of years, and it's one of the last islands of bipartisanship in the Congress, and I appreciate the professionalism that both of you bring, and frankly, how often you're in agreement. It's very impressive to see a bill reported out 60-2 or whatever the vote was, but it's always overwhelming, and I know a good deal of debate goes on inside the committee and that sort of thing, but at the end of the day, you always manage to come up with a consensus process. I will and really not to respond to my good friend from Colorado, but just to point out the military is actually remarkably efficient in some ways. We always talk about the inefficiencies, but I don't know anybody else keeps 50-year-old airplanes flying and in combat-ready condition. The average age of an American fighter, I think, is like something like 25 years old. So it's not as if these guys are just throwing stuff away. They're updating it constantly, using it constantly. Some of our, I've got the privilege to represent an air depot at Tinker Air Force, which is the largest air depot in the world. And again, we have over 400 KC-135, which is still the backbone of the tanker fleet. The last one was built in 1962. So it's pretty amazing what they do and the lengths they do go to try and be frugal with the dollars and keep them going. I know you guys do a tremendous job working with them, making sure that we maintain the technical capacity to really elongate these weapon systems. The other end of my district, I've got Fort Sill. We haven't had a new cannon since the 1960s. They've been updated. They're very different, much more capable weapon systems. Paladin's still the basic field artillery piece, but we've not brought on anything new. So it's pretty impressive that these things, I know we're updating that thing right now in a series of modifications and improvements. So I just, at the height of the Cold War, we were spending 9% of our GDP on defense, less than 5 now, it's just barely over 4. We were spending 50% of the federal budget on defense in 1960. It's about 17 or 18%, 15% today. So if anything, and, again, this is an area where I would argue we've made too much in the way of savings in recent years. 70,000 fewer people in the Army, 20,000 fewer Marines. You start adding that up, it doesn't make for a safer world, and it does lead to a really stretched force. The other thing I would point to, and I would be the first to agree that our friends and don't always do what we would like them to do in our alliances, but they have stepped up more, and we've pulled back a lot. Again, in 1992, something like 36% of the American military was deployed overseas. Today, it's about 10%. And when I hear talks about us, doing everything in NATO, we're down there from over 300,000 people on the ground to about 62 or 63,000 now. So, and these forward deployments are actually to our advantage. It's actually cheaper, according to the head of the Pacific Command, was testifying before Defense Approach this year. He says it's actually cheaper to operate a carrier strike force out of Japan than it is out of California, simply because of the costs that the Japanese pick up and associated with this, everything from facilities to operational contribution as well. They also have a terrifically capable Navy of their own now that they have really upgraded in recent years. Maintain 50, I think they're the 3rd largest Navy in the world now. It's pretty substantial. So anyway, all I do that is to, again, echo my friends' I think very wise comments about what good work comes out of your committee, how well you guys work together, and you bring it down here, and we always have a vigorous and good debate over it, but at the end of the day, we all tend to, on Democrat and Republican alike, to follow the lead of your committee, and in a bipartisan way, we usually pass this authorization. So I look forward to a vigorous debate. I know we'll make some changes. We'll have a lot of amendments, but the base product is awfully good, and it always is every year you guys bring it in. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back his time. Thank you very much. The gentleman from Georgia, do you seek time? Gentleman does not seek time. Does the gentleman from Georgia seek time, a former member of the United States Army?
Yeah,
Gentleman's
I
recognized.
seek time, and I'm still a member of the United States Air Force.
Oh, excuse
So-
me. Thank you.
I leave my Army for my brother and my Cyrus. Look, I want to say, this is one of the times when we actually, do come together, and Joe's chairman and ranking member, but I want to just touch on a couple of things. That one, the chairman and I have went through many rounds of the bureaucracy issues. And I think this is one of the things for those of us who are still in the military, who point and say, here's the problems. There's these levels of why. And I think when you look at it and you look at what we need in procurement, we're looking at manpower, we look at is the manpower, and I appreciate what your position has been, is looking at manpowering to say we need the people in the frontline positions instead of this backroom bureaucracy that takes, and I know they're listening, so a CAT card that can't come to a member who should get a CAT card. Those are the kind of things that we get bogged down by. But I want to go back to one that Congressman Steve brought up, and that's this issue of suicide. As one on the dais who actually has been very involved in that, given my position as a chaplain and being in the war zone and coming back out of that. You made a comment that really was something that I think needs to be emphasized and foot stomped more at the Pentagon level, because this is at the highest levels. We've got to quit every 2 to 3 years figuring out, let's look for the newest program to stop suicide. We need to quit looking for the newest, latest technique out there and get back to the stuff that we know that works, taking care of our people, asking the right questions, working with your chaplain corps, working with your mental health corps, working with the commanders, understanding this thing. Instead of coming out with a new and sending somebody to get trained, let's concentrate on the basics and quit changing the program. I've been in the Air Force now since 2002. I was in the Navy beforehand. I have been under, I believe, 4 different suicide prevention programs. Really? For those of us who actually talk to the member or sit in front of them, it's pretty simple. You got to get to the person who has come to, and if anybody in this room has never experienced that, or you can't understand suicide, you won't until you get to the place where you don't see anything but that light ahead of you. That's sort of what these members deal with. They deal with it in such a way that the only thing they see is nothing. They don't see any other help, and you've got to break free, and you've got to know this. And most of the time, they'll never tell you. So instead of the new fancy program that gets somebody a bullet point on their OPR, let's start really thinking about what actually matters for these members. And the gentleman from Colorado brought the drone, and man, this is another area, and I'm just going to bring this in here. We talk about PTSD, we talk about a lot of the stress, but we're entering into a whole different world with our unmanned, because truly they are manned. They're unmanned in the sense that they're flying unmanned, but they are manned. And this is an interesting area that we've got to continue to look at, because some of the worst, discussions of mental health and other issues, and this mental health is another issue that's got to be addressed in here, and we see it every day. And we can't, and from my position, the chaplain side, but from the mental health side, we can work together very well. There's stuff we can do greatly together. One's not better than the other. But in this area right here, you're detaching the action, and that's very concerning. Because they see it, they go home, they eat with their breakfast with their kids, they go to work in some very terrible situations, and then come home, and it's like, wow, that was work. These are the kind of things. So I appreciate your comment. I didn't want to take that long, but bureaucracy, we'll go on another day. But just stay on it. If I can't emphasize that enough, just get to a program and stick with it. It doesn't have to be the next commander's OPR billet. Just stick with the things that work. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. We are now down virtually to 0 time that is available in this vote. I'd like to have us go down, vote. There are 2 votes. I'd like to ask both of our witnesses to please come back. We will go immediately to the gentleman from the state of Washington for his available questions, and then move forward with the rest of the committee work. So the committee will be in a recess pending the call of the chair, which will be immediately at the last vote. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Smith seems to exercise some hesitancy. Would I be out of place to ask Mr. Newhouse if he thought he might have questions of Mr. Smith?
Well, I don't mind doing that at all. I don't want to limit. I never try and limit people.
that.
And I don't want to put that on him at this time. Would you like to engage the gentleman in a short period of time?
I have just a couple of thoughts. I don't know like how many seconds we have, but something that does pertain to our home state. I wanted to at least give a shout out if I could.
Good, I would,
Sure.
the gentleman may use the time, and,
Well, I'll just say that I appreciate, a lot of things that have been said here I agree with, but one of the things that's included in the authorization within this bill is the continued commitment on the part of the federal government towards the important work that's being done and the cleanup of the nuclear waste that's a result of the production of nuclear weapons throughout our history from World War II on. And so I just wanted to underscore that while the gentleman from Washington State was here and acknowledge important work for that. Yeah, so thank you. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I can.
okay, well, with that said, then
Pause.
we save our witnesses the opportunity to have to come back. I would like to thank them both for their time before the committee, and we will come back and see if there's anything else to discuss and then go into closing the hearing portion. So we'll be subject to the call of the chair at the end of the last vote. Thank you very much. Committee will come to order, and thank you very much for coming back after the votes. The committee will now hear from any other member that seek to give testimony this first day, H.R. 4909, and for general debate, and seeing none, we will now close the general debate portion of the consideration of H.R. 4909, and the chair will now be interested in a motion from the gentleman, the chairman, young chairman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move the committee grant H.R. 4909, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2017, a structured rule. The rule provides 1 hour of general debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and the ranking minority member of the Committee on Armed Services. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of the Rules Committee print 114-51, modified by the amendment printed in Part A of the Rules Committee report, shall be considered as adopted, and the bill as amended shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions of the bill as amended. The rule makes in order only those further amendments printed in Part B of the Rules Committee report and amendments en bloc described in Section 3 of the rule. The rule provides that the amendments printed in Part B of the report may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and unopponent, shall not be subject to the amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. The rule waives all points of order against the amendments printed in Part B of the report or against amendments en bloc as described in Section 3 of the rule. Section 3 of the rule provides that it shall be in order at any time for the chair of the Committee on Armed Services or his designee to offer amendments en bloc consisting of amendments printed in Part B of the report not earlier disposed of. Amendments en bloc shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for 20 minutes, equally divided and controlled by the chair and a ranking minority member of the Committee on Armed Services or their designees, shall not be subject to amendment and shall not be subject to demand for division of the question. Finally, the rule provides that no further consideration of the bill shall be in order except pursuant to a subsequent order of the House.
You've now heard the motion from the gentleman from Oklahoma, and we have had a previous discussion about what we're attempting to do today to divide into general debate and then other amendments. Today will be the general debate portion for discussion so that we can get this on the floor and begin that process. I'm encouraging members, and we're attempting to do this as a Rules Committee as soon as we finalize this, to make sure that members of the House are aware that the amendments are being made in order and be prepared for tomorrow. Chair would now be in receipt of a motion of an amendment or discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's recognized.
So, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate what we're trying to do, but I do nonetheless have an amendment to this rule, and I move that the committee strike the portion of the rule which self-executes your amendment, the Sessions Amendment number 2. The Sessions Amendment violates the cut-go rule, Clause 10 of Rule 21, because it would increase government spending. And rather than prohibiting consideration of the amendment, as you have done with so many Democratic amendments in the past, and will do again this week on this very bill, you have self-executed it. Mr. Chairman, there is a double standard here. You continually waive the rules for Republican proposals and then hide behind those same rules to block Democratic ones. In fact, 98% of all waivers given by the committee have been given for Republican proposals. So, Mr. Chairman, if the rules are going to be enforced strictly for the minority's proposals, they should be enforced for the majority as well. And so I would urge that my colleagues support my amendment.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the gentleman bringing forth the discussion, and the issue does address, either way we go with this, whether it be the gentleman, Mr. Thornberry's amendment, our amendment, or a mixture therein, of an interesting, as you suggest, a PAYGO or spending phenomena. And I carefully looked at it, and I'll be pleased to run through it if you'd like, but the bottom line is that we're very hopeful that the Selective Service, upon evaluation,
that we would not have this a continuation. And we'll find out what happens when it goes to conference, but I believe the Selective Service has been a very useful tool to enable our country and the military to be prepared. We have very successful, and I believe the testimony today supported an understanding that we don't even need a draft. Our nation, the young men and young women of this nation are volunteering. We're reducing the size of our military and the dependence upon this sort of government program that would require giving people their information only to be found out several years later that we don't keep current is simply an exercise in futility. But with that said, I know the gentleman is arguing on very substantial points of interest that he makes, and the gentleman, in fact, I believe, in any vetting process would be considered correct in his evaluation. Meaning that I
You're
did
vote for my
choose,
amendment?
meaning that I did choose to do this, but it was in essence to save us what I believe is good policy, notwithstanding how someone may rate that. So, further discussion. The vote will now be on the McGovern amendment. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No.
I ask for a roll call, Mr. Chairman?
Gentleman asks for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fox?
No.
Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Cole? Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Woodall? Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, no. Mr. Stivers? Mr. Stivers, no. Mr. Collins? Mr. Collins, no. Mr. Byrne? Mr. Byrne, no. Mr. Newhouse? Mr. Newhouse, no. Ms. Slaughter? Mr. McGovern?
Yes.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings? Aye. Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis? Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report the total.
2 yeas, 9 nays.
The amendment's not agreed to, not agreed to. Further amendment or discussion? Seeing none, the vote will now be on the motion from the gentleman from Oklahoma. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, the ayes have it. Accordingly, the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Bradley Byrne, will be handling this for Republicans.
And Mr. Polis will handle it for the Democrats.
And Mr. Polis for Democrats. I'd like to announce to the committee that tomorrow at 2:00 p.m., we will gather together once again as a tight-knit group, the Rules Committee. NDAA Part 2. Sounds like a movie, but it'll be right here, 2:00 tomorrow. We'll also be handling Milcon, VA, and the Zika virus. I want to thank, in particular, our awesome stenographers for being here today and putting up with us. This completes our work for the day.
Sorry, I was trying to get my police week 1 minute in.